The Benghazi uproar gets louder. A retired general adds his voice to the others who contend there was never a connection between the Benghazi terror attacks and an anti-Muslim video. This is Special Report. Good evening, I'm Brett Baer. Another former military official says the Obama administration knew from the beginning the Benghazi terror attacks were not the result of outrage over a video. We have Fox team coverage tonight. Ed Henry's at the White House with another tough day of spin for the president's top spokesman. But we begin with Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge and more testimony today on Capitol Hill. Good evening, Catherine.
Well, Brett, nearly 20 months after the attack, the administration's explanations about who knew what and when are beginning to unravel in a very public way.
Any or all of the above.
The testimony laid bare uncomfortable facts.
This was a hostile action. This was no demonstration gone terribly awry.
Retired Brigadier General Robert Lovell, a deputy intelligence director for the Africa Command, testified that 7 hours into the Benghazi assault at their command post in Germany, they knew there was no connection to a protest or an internet video.
It was early on in the evening of September 11th.
Before 3:15 in the morning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Within hours, sources tell Fox a target list was assembled, and Lovell testified a terrorist group with known ties to al-Qaeda was blamed.
It was we felt it was Ansar al-Sharia.
Lovell's testimony is consistent with the September 12th email from State Department official Beth Jones to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's closest aides, including Cheryl Mills, that the Libyan ambassador was told Ansar al-Sharia was responsible. What has largely been overlooked is that hours earlier at 10 p.m. September 11th, even before the attack was over, Mrs. Clinton sent out a press release directly linking the video to the Benghazi violence. While Mrs. Clinton's statement was out of sync with the intelligence, it was reinforced 3 days later by the Ben Rhodes email, which critics say attempted to shape the public discussion of a terrorist attack. Lovell testified the State Department did not respond quickly that night.
It's not what they did in that particular situation, it's what they didn't do. They didn't come forward with stronger requests for action.
What was the mood in the room? What was the feeling? Was it to save our people?
There was desperation there to be able to get...
It was what?
Desperation there to gain situational awareness and to be able to do something.
Lovell was not in the operational chain of command, a point emphasized by one committee Democrat.
There might be some who, for various and sundry reasons, would like to distort your testimony and suggest that you're testifying that we could have, should have done a lot more than we did because we had capabilities we simply didn't utilize. That is not your testimony.
That is not my testimony.
I thank you very much, General.
But Lovell said repeatedly it's about the future and rebuilding the trust lost in Benghazi.
We should have done more. And we owe it to the memory of those 4 people that are fallen.
The House Speaker issued a statement today that Secretary Kerry should come to the Hill to testify unless more documents are provided in response to those outstanding subpoenas. Brett.
Catherine, thank you. The push to get answers on Benghazi is a cause no longer kept alive only by Fox News and a handful of other media outlets. Now the mainstream media is getting involved as well, and at times it's getting intense. Here's Chief White House Correspondent Ed Henry.
Day 2 of White House Press Secretary Jay Carney under fire, sticking to his story that the key email from Ben Rhodes used to brief Susan Rice for the Sunday talk shows was not about Benghazi.
The email was about protests around the region.
Even as Republicans pounce, charging the credibility of President Obama and his top aides is on the line.
It is not only now the needless and tragic deaths of 4 Americans, but it is an obvious cover-up by the White House.
Carney pushed back hard on that charge, saying the only part of the email mentioning Benghazi was taken from CIA talking points. The press secretary also seemed to blame the barrage of questioning this week on Fox, even though several news networks have pressed Carney.
No, we're investigating it.
Do you need a copy of the CIA talking points?
I've seen them.
I can get
read them out all you want. Go ahead.
The only thing in that email that refers to Benghazi is a cut and paste from the talking points, which, much to your disappointment and your boss's disappointment, turned out to be produced by the CIA.
Beyond that attack, Carney's point is Rhodes' email was based on nonpartisan analysis and thus was not an effort to shield the president from fallout over a terror attack in the 2012 election. While the Rhodes email prepping Rice for the Sunday shows stressed she was not talking politics, the memo downplayed talk of terror and advised Rice in the the pre-election TV appearances to focus on the anti-Muslim video and tell viewers, quote, people have come to trust that President Obama provides leadership that is steady and statesmanlike.
If it's not about Benghazi, why turn it over in a Benghazi suit? It seems...
You would have to ask State Department about their process for responding to FOIA requests.
The State Department is run by Secretary John Kerry and is not a rogue agency. Officials were responding to a lawsuit from the conservative group Judicial Watch for Benghazi documents that had been subpoenaed by congressional Republicans but were not originally turned over by the White House.
Now they need to distinguish this document from all the other Benghazi documents, and the way to do that is to pretend it wasn't about Benghazi.
Now, Jay Carney also noted that thousands of documents on Benghazi have been turned over to congressional investigators, though Speaker Boehner suggested today he may bring back Secretary Kerry to find out why this email was not turned over. Brett?
Ed, thank you. Let's get more now on the Benghazi situation. Tommy Vietor is former spokesman for the National Security Council during the Obama administration. Thanks for joining us, Tommy.
Thanks for having me.
You were at the White House September 11th,
yes.
2012. Let me start there. A lot of focus has obviously been on this Ben Rhodes email.
Sure.
But let me start September. Yeah, and we will. September 11th. Who tells Hillary Clinton at 10 p.m. to put out this statement that says some have sought to justify this vicious behavior? The announcement has already happened about the Benghazi attack as a response to inflammatory material posted on the internet. The United States deplores any intentional effort to denigrate the religious beliefs of others. Our commitment is to religious tolerance, goes back to the very beginning of our nation. But let me be clear, there is never any justification for violent acts of this kind. Now, at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, this is still going on, this attack. So where does that come from?
I don't know, but let's talk about what actually happened with the attack. Is there was sort of one phase of the attack, a long period of calm followed by another. So let me just try to give you a sense of what we were thinking that day. We didn't know definitively that the ambassador was dead until late that evening.
But he was missing.
There had been, oh, absolutely, and we were unbelievably nervous about his safety as well-being of others at that facility. We had witnessed a series of protests throughout the world where millions of people literally were taking to the streets, were overrunning our embassy in Cairo because of this video.
Sure,
and there were individuals quoted who were on the scene that night saying they were there because of the video.
But
so I don't think it's unreasonable to make that assumption.
The guys who've testified, including General Lovell today, said they knew right away.
Yes.
And they put it up the chain.
Respectfully,
and the intelligence community has essentially said the same thing.
Respectfully to the general, that's just not accurate. There's no way anyone knew definitively the motivations of the attackers that evening. I don't think we know definitively today. What I've seen is in a number of outlets, reporters talk to people on the scene that night, Ansar Sharia members, extremists, bad people, no doubt, who said they were there because they were upset about this video.
Okay, so let me just be clear. You're trying to say there's some aspect of protest to it still?
No, I didn't say protest. I said they were upset because of an inflammatory video and decided to do whatever they did.
So you're still saying it was because of the video?
They're quoted in the newspaper saying that's why they were there.
No, but Tommy, since then there's been all this testimony about a military operation, very skilled people who can operate mortars with precision, and that it was, even Mike Morrell testified, that his analysts in Langley were wrong and he should have gone to the guys on the ground. The CIA station chief said it was an attack day one, first hours.
You make good points. I am not saying that this was a peaceful protest run amok. That was dead wrong. We got that wrong, and I don't know how we got it so wrong, but we got it wrong. We've corrected it since. What I'm saying is people on the scene that night, individuals involved in the attack said they were there because they were upset about the video. Let's take them at face value over Darrell Issa or someone who's sitting in Washington.
14 days later. Now, you have to know that 14 days have passed, and you now know that it's a terrorist attack because everybody on the ground has gone up the chain. The email said it's not an escalation of a protest from the station chief. The president goes to the UN, September 25th. He says this.
There are no words that excuse the killing of innocents. There's no video that justifies an attack on an embassy.
All right. Now, who is vetting that?
Brett, there were multiple attacks on embassies. Our Cairo embassy was overrun.
But nobody else died.
Our embassy in Sudan was overrun. Our embassy in Yemen was overrun. Was
anybody else hurt?
Justifying the death of innocents doesn't just mean Americans. That
means
countless people died in protests across the region during that time.
Okay.
Honestly,
so he's referring to everybody but the Americans.
Washington has this collective amnesia about the state of the world at this time period.
Other people say you have amnesia.
There was a protest in Australia, for God's sake. There were protests across the planet because of this video.
Okay, but people in America would probably be talking about the Americans, including the U.S. ambassador who was killed. Of the things that were happening around the globe, that probably took precedent. Don't you agree?
The ambassador's death, the 3 others who were killed that day, that is a tragedy.
Okay.
And what we should be worried about is making sure that never happens again. Instead, this ridiculous political game about talking points.
It's ridiculous. Don't you think it's ridiculous? Listen, you're out of government.
Just
try to be straight here. Isn't it ridiculous that this particular email did not get released originally?
Yes, I wish that email had been released.
Why did it take a FOIA and a judge to get this Ben Rhodes email?
I don't know. I bet every single person in that White House wished that email had been released earlier. I do too, because it tells us nothing new. It tells us that what we said privately was what we said publicly, because that's what we thought had occurred. And Ben's email clearly references protests, plural, because there were countless across the world.
But if you're a communications expert, if you're prepping an official for a Sunday show, you're probably going to prep on the biggest question of the Sunday show, which probably, maybe, would have been the U.S. ambassador and 3 others who died.
That's fair. And I was among the people who prepped Susan Rice. And we talked about, the protests were front and center in Ben's email because there was still concern about additional violence in the region.
Let's go to the talking points.
The day of Ben's email, just I want to flag, was Friday, which is Friday prayers in a number of countries like Pakistan, and we were extremely worried.
The 14th is the day you're talking about. According to the emails and the timeline, the CIA circulates new talking points after they've removed a mention of al-Qaeda. And then at 6:21, the White House, add a line about the administration warning of September 10th of social media reports calling for demonstrations. True?
I believe so.
Did you also change attacks to demonstrations in the talking points?
Maybe. I don't really remember.
You don't remember?
Dude, this was like 2 years ago. We're still talking about the most mundane
it is the
process
thing that everybody is talking about.
We're talking about the process of editing talking points. That's what bureaucrats do all day long. Your producers edit scripts multiple times.
Attacks to demonstrations. Did you do that?
No. What is the question? Did I edit attacks?
In the CIA talking points, it was edited from attacks to demonstrations.
No, Michael Morell has testified about what he changed and what was changed in those emails and the whole process of that.
But the talking points went through the public affairs people.
Which
is kind of unique.
These are the most well understood and discussed talking points in the history of talking points, and Michael Morell testified that he took them back, didn't like them, and changed them.
Here's also what Michael Morell said in that testimony.
It was probably days later that I read what she said on the shows.
And what was your reaction when you finally did?
My reaction was twofold. One was that what she said about the attacks evolving spontaneously from a protest was exactly what the talking point said, and it was exactly what the intelligence community analysts believed. When she talked about the video, my reaction was that's not something that the analysts have attributed this attack to.
So, they didn't say video, and CIA didn't say it. It came from where?
Guys quoted in newspapers saying that's why they were there. No, newspapers are not the White House. It came from
But somebody has to prep Susan Rice to get to video. And the only thing that we see doing that is Ben Rhodes' email. Now, Jay Carney says that email is not about Benghazi at all. But the only place the video comes up is Ben Rhodes' email.
No, the place the video came up is in the dozens of countries where people were protesting because of that video. Maybe in this sort of alternate reality where there's a giant cover-up, the only place on the planet where no one cared about this video was Benghazi. But I think a reasonable individual at that time would think those attacks might have been motivated because of the innocence of Muslims video.
Well, a reasonable individual testified today, Brigadier General Lovell. He's a one-star general. He's well respected because he's served the country very well. This is what he said today.
We didn't know how long this would last when we became aware of the distress, nor did we completely understand what we had in front of us, be it a kidnapping, rescue, recovery, protracted hostile engagement, or any or all of the above. But what we did know quite early on was that this was a hostile action. This was no demonstration gone terribly awry. To the point of what happened, the facts led to the conclusion of a terrorist attack.
He says they knew right away.
Yeah, well, as I said earlier, this notion that a peaceful protest erupted and turned into something else was wrong. And we got that wrong, the intelligence community got that wrong, and that's been corrected.
Here's a guy who was watching real-time monitoring.
Yeah.
He's the head of intelligence for AFRICOM.
Sure.
He is watching real-time, sending this up the chain. He says this.
If you think you can divine the motives of an attacker via a drone feed, I think that's a bit of a stretch. Now, what I'd say is...
people on the ground testified that they knew where the ambassador was, that they were very military in their precision.
I remember...
It was not guys that were coming to protest. They had mortars and heavy weapons.
Brett, a couple of things. One, I was in the Situation Room that night, okay, and we didn't know where the ambassador was definitively. In fact,
was the president in the Situation Room?
No, and the fact that your network at one time reported that he watched video feed of the attack as it was ongoing is part of what I think has been
let me get to the bottom
of
it
inaccurate.
Where was the president?
In the White House. Let me finish my initial statement. Okay, the notion that we could, divine motives from a drone feed, I think, is wrong. And I also think that this idea that the military had the capability to rescue those individuals but chose not to, I think is extremely unfair to the military. And Admiral Mullen said basically the opposite.
In the ARB report.
Yeah.
Where was the president?
In the White House.
He wasn't in the Situation Room?
At what point in the evening? I mean, he was constantly...
Any point in the evening.
You know, it's well known that when the attack was first briefed to him, it was in the Oval Office, and he was updated constantly. And during that briefing, he told Tom Donilon and his Joint Chiefs and his SecDef to begin moving all military assets into the region.
So then when Hillary Clinton talks to him by phone at 10 p.m., he's where?
I don't know. I don't have a tracking device on him in the residence.
But you were in the Situation Room and he wasn't there?
Yes, I was in the White House.
And the president was not in the Situation Room?
Not in the room I was in.
Okay. And soon after the phone call that Hillary Clinton...
You don't have to be in a Situation Room to monitor an intelligence situation. The PDB is in the Oval Office.
We've never heard where the president was,
yeah.
and no one has said. Hillary Clinton calls the president at 10 p.m., and then soon after that, we get this statement blaming the video. And do you know, again, where that came from?
Same answer as a minute ago. I do not know what the specific language for the State Department statement came from.
Tommy, I really appreciate your time. I want to end it with this, the politics. You talked about the politics on another network. We took some of that. We played it for Senator Lindsey Graham. Just take a listen.
Lindsey Graham is trying to fend off a Tea Party primary. That's why he seized on this issue. It's an open joke of his up on Capitol Hill. People know why he's doing this. So, you know, there's certainly politics in all of this.
If I am doing something wrong for political reasons, I should have egg on my face and I should be punished by the people of South Carolina. If what he is saying is a bold-faced lie and that I'm correct that this administration hid the truth from the American people about a coordinated terrorist attack because they were more worried about the president's re-election than telling the truth to the American people about why 4 people died, they need to be held accountable.
Your response?
My response is it's self-evident that Lindsey Graham is playing politics with this issue. Just this morning, I got an email from his listserv, from him, you know, trumpeting his appearance on this show last night about Benghazi. He thinks this is good politics for him. That's why he talks about it all the time. That's what politicians do. That's fine, but let's just be honest about it. Let's call it what it is.
So you think there's nothing left to learn about Benghazi and the country should move on?
Here's what I think we should talk about today, every single day until it's fixed. What is being done to make sure this never happens again? Are the ARB recommendations being implemented? Are individuals abroad safer? I think the talking points have been talked until there's nothing left to say.
Finally, did you brief Susan Rice before that appearance on the Sunday show?
There were people on a call as referenced in Ben's email, and I was one of a number, yeah.
Tommy, we really appreciate you coming.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Please join us this weekend for a special look at the latest Benghazi developments. The Fox News Reporting Hour can be seen Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern, Saturday at 10 p.m., and Sunday at 9 Eastern. Don't miss it. Up next, we will finally have numbers on who's paying their Obamacare premiums and who isn't. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates across
for all of us who are interested, but also especially for those family members who are most interested. Miles, thanks very much. Richard, thanks to you as well. Just ahead, as violence explodes right now in Ukraine, and it's getting dramatically worse. Look at these pictures. Russians are rallying behind Vladimir Putin as he laying the groundwork for an all-out war.